goodness.
But let's turn the page from that and talk about the topic that we have teed up for our first segment of the show today, which is the myths of motivation and understanding where motivation for employees come from. And this is something that I've been studying for years and have been working into the training that I've done with leaders for years. And it's born out of a question that I got for years from leaders at all levels, whether they were CEOs and other C-suite members, all the way down to frontline team leaders. And that question is this: how do I motivate people? How do I get people that work for me to care and try and give their all, and to care as much about I do as what we're doing here? At times when apathy creeps in, or at times when people are low or spent, how do I motivate people? And so a number of years ago, I decided to do a deeper dive. And I did a lot of, I didn't have an adequate answer to the question, even doing a lot of work around employee engagement and leadership. And so I did a deeper dive into some of the psychology of motivation. And what you find out is that the answer to the question, how do I motivate people, is you don't. You can't. And so I want to advise all the boss heroes out there today to just stop trying. It's not going to get you anywhere. And that may feel like sweet relief washing over you right now. And maybe it feels like, hey, I've been doing that for years, Joe, and now you're telling me that I don't have to, and it sounds like I'm off the hook, and I want to high five somebody right now.
Yes.
But it sounds like there's a catch, doesn't it, Alyssa?
There has to be, because nothing is ever that easy.
So here's the myth of motivation, and maybe the way to say this is the truth of motivation in response to the myth of motivation. Motivation isn't something you do to someone. You cannot reach inside someone and flip a switch and ignite drive or energy to perform because things got busy on a Tuesday. Right? It doesn't work that way. We know that. When you take a look at the psychology of motivation and what leads people to self-directed, self-motivated action that requires effort and resilience, what you find out is that motivation is something that people experience under certain conditions.
Ooh,
and it's those conditions that I wrote about in my first book, Cure for the Common Leader, and that I want to talk a little bit about today. Let me ask you this question, though, Alyssa. When you were pulling a traditional 9-to-5 in the workplace, what motivated you the most at work? And maybe we can swap out that word motivated with energized. When did you feel the most energized or most alive at work?
I think if I can apply my now knowledge to my prior self, what I would pinpoint as my touchstone for energy, motivation, whatever the term we're going to use is when I was in service to other people. I felt like that's my jam. That's what I should be doing. Yep. Just that will keep me going. It ultimately was not going to be the next, title, the next, more employees, whatever it might be, even though those were nice and more money was lovely. But at the core of it, I truly believe that I was most motivated when I was doing what I now believe is my purpose, which is serving others.
So we could make an argument that the job on the whole was in service to others, right?
Yeah.
The nature of the work all the time, but you probably didn't feel inspired all the time.
No, absolutely.
And so I would wonder if the true answer is, I'm going to tweak your language a little bit if you'll give me permission to put words in your mouth.
Feel free.
The days when you felt most energized were probably not just the days when you were in service to others, because again, you could make the argument that was every day, but it was probably on the days when you had evidence that you were in service to others. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that feels more tangible. Yeah.
What was some of the evidence that you got that you were in service to others?
I know that, verbal feedback still was and is important to me, to hear it from people like, oh, that made all the difference. Or, oh, I hadn't really thought of that before. Thank you so much. Or so hearing it from other people that what I had what they needed in some form or capacity.
Absolutely. So we know that that's one of the conditions that employees, no matter what job they're in, if you want people to experience the conditions that lead them to give it all they've got, they need to believe that their work matters, that their work makes some kind of difference. And there's a lot of jobs out there that we might describe as mundane, or people might describe some of what they do as grunt work. But if we can connect the dots between even the most basic or mundane tasks of a job and why that work matters, the difference it makes in the lives of others, the ways in which it matters and that person matters, we start to supercharge motivation. So that's one of the conditions that we know is important. A couple other conditions, and I'd be interested which other things on this list, Alyssa, you found yourself maybe not paying enough attention to as a leader.
Mm.
So some of the other conditions on the list is that we know people need opportunities to learn and grow and progress in their role. And now sometimes that could be the traditional career path, promotion, raise, or sometimes it's just the chance to develop and learn new things. But we know that that is a part of what energizes people at work and motivates them. Another condition at the workplace is the opportunity to form sophisticated relationships, meaningful relationships with people around them, with my boss, with my team. And obviously different people have different levels of social comfort, but feeling like you belong, feeling connected, feeling embraced and included in your workplace is a critical condition for people to thrive. A couple others, people need the materials, information, and equipment to do their jobs. Right? You could have great people that you're working with, but if your computer can't keep up with the reports that you have to run every day, that is a demotivating experience. If you don't have the information you need to do your job, i.e., hey, I was told to design this whole new customer outreach initiative, but nobody told me that we're getting a new marketing person next month and they're going to change everything.
Mm.
That could be a demotivating experience. A couple others real quick, and then I'm going to turn this over to you because I'm interested in where you feel like a lot of people have gaps. We know that pay and benefits matter. People need to perceive that their pay and benefits are fair and adequate. And we also know that people need to have their ideas and opinions and challenges solicited and considered.
Mm.
So among the handful of things that I just rattled off, where do you think you were falling short as a leader? And where do you think other leaders might fall short too?
So I feel like I'm in a better position to maybe talk about what I experienced uh, as a leader from leadership.
Got it.
And then maybe I can like articulate how that translated to how I acted and what I did for my team.
Yeah.
Because I feel like maybe then I overcompensated in some other areas based upon what I felt I was lacking from
Okay.
my leadership, if
So
that makes
from that
sense.
list, what were the
Yeah.
things then that maybe you weren't getting that were important to you?
So that relationship bit, right? That key, the whole key thing to me is like that relationship, that sense of belonging, that true sense of someone cared about me in a real way that wasn't for their own personal gain.
Mm.
And I the thing that came up for me as you're listing these things was, so are all of these elements equal? Like, do we need to have equal amounts of these needs, these conditions being met in order to create or sustain that motivation? Or is it possible that, for instance, I experienced a great opportunity to learn and grow? I mean, that's one of the ways that I got into coaching was
Mhm.
I was able to go to school and get additional training and learn, and all of that was supported through my role. but I lacked that big relationship piece. And
Yeah.
so it obviously didn't end up with me still being in that situation. And a large part of it was because I was missing that relationship piece.
So I'm going to speak to that whole are all conditions created equal question
Yes,
that you just
please.
raised. But before I get there, I want to
Okay.
make sure we capture the second half of what you alluded to a minute
Right,
ago,
right, right.
which was because you weren't getting certain things from your environment, from your boss, I think you used the word overcompensated.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
how did that show itself when you weren't getting what you needed? How did that show itself, and how you then led your team?
So I think I wouldn't ever describe myself. Maybe my prior teammates would describe me at some level as a micromanager, but I feel like in my attempts to buffer or to filter for my teams, um, that whole relationship bit, um, I overstepped. I tried to be more than what was most conducive for their growth and their experience of me as a leader.
Were you aware at the time that you were overcompensating or that you were overstepping? Or is it
I
only
don't
something that you've picked up on now with the gift of time and space?
yeah, but what is that the saying, hindsight is 2020. I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
real I think maybe I didn't consciously know it, but my body sure as heck did.
Mm.
And so my value system, and so whenever I was able to then articulate each of those things, I'm like, oh, holy crap. As I've
Mm.
gone on through life and gained these other bits of knowledge about me and who I am and how I operate, now I can look back and say, oh, I was experiencing this.
Okay. So with the gift of hindsight then, if you could go back in time,
Yeah.
what behaviors with your staff would you change?
I think I would be less hard on myself and thus open the opportunities for them and their growth a lot more, be more receptive to their ideas and being willing to go to bat for people no matter the cost to my own ego, title, relationship with the higher ups.
Wow.
I would always have their back
Yeah.
because that's now who I know I am, and I will not ever let another workplace try to steal that.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. That's incredibly insightful, and I think that would be a hard thing to admit for anyone. And so I greatly appreciate you shining a light on that. It reminds me of an analogy that I've made more than once, that there are days when bosses need to be sports agents.
Mm.
When when you think of, when you picture the kind of stereotypical like Hollywood agent or sports agent in your
Wasn't that
mind.
what like Jerry Maguire was?
Right.
Like I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, all right.
And if you watch the first part of that movie, okay, well, let's take Jerry Maguire for a minute.
Okay.
The whole first 15 minutes of that movie show us him living the kind of cliched stereotype of the
Yeah.
sports agent, where he's looking at people and being like, "I love you, baby. I'll fight for you. I'll die for you. I'm gonna get you
Yes.
everything, right? I'm not gonna sleep. I'm not gonna eat until I get you what I want for you." But there are times when bosses need to be sports agents, where they need
Mm.
to be the strongest, most vocal, most noticeable advocates for their people, for their professional development, for their pay and benefits, for the resources that they need. All of those conditions that I just listed
Yeah.
are things that my boss needs to advocate for me in my organization. In most places, they don't just organically happen. Those things come from my boss making them happen for me and advocating for them to people that I don't always see or interact with. And so your confession there reminded me of the sports agent analogy that this is how bosses need to show up sometimes.
I think that there's a theme going on. We were talking about racing and all these other sports metaphors, and now we're going into the whole sports agent. So I think that there's both literally and figuratively a wealth of perspectives that our boss heroes out there can take and put forth.
And here's the other crazy thing. And Alyssa, if you're watching this on YouTube, Alyssa's going to hold her hand up and swear that I did not tell her this ahead of time.
Okay. Yeah,
But
I don't know what I swear to, but we didn't talk, so.
Last night, while crashing out here in my office, I flipped on the TV in our little kitchenette, and on the screen appeared the movie Jerry Maguire. And
no
so the
freaking
fact
way.
the fact that you just brought that up, some people would call it serendipitous. I might say it's a little creepy. That and I've been thinking about the sports agent analogy for a while, so it didn't pop into my head this morning after watching that movie last night. I was actually writing about this 2 weeks ago in prepping some materials for a future project, and so when that movie came on last night, I thought, oh, that's kind of funny. I've been thinking about the whole sports agent thing, and then unprompted, you brought up the movie, and so that's pretty wild.
I'm gonna go with crazy and creepy and very weird. But cool.
Well, and before we move off this, though, let me keep my promise to those who are listening, which was to speak to your question about whether all conditions
yes.
are created equal.
Yeah.
This is a question I get a lot when I do our sort of foundational BossBetter leadership development workshops with clients. When we go through these list of conditions that bosses need to create. A couple years ago, I had the chief medical officer of a multi-site practice group raise his hand in the room and say, Joe, are those listed in order on the screen, or do they all carry equal weight? Very much the same question you asked. And I'd had to tell him, and I'll tell our listeners, that the bad news is no. They are not all created equal. The truth is that what's important from one person to the next is different, right? The things that were important to you that you wanted to get from your supervisor are going to be different than the things that the person next to you wants. There may be a person on your team who really needs to feel that connectedness to the team and wants those sophisticated relationships, whereas what was most important to you is that professional growth and development and climbing that career ladder. But wait, it gets worse. Not only is it different from person to person.
You said you were a chronic optimist, Joe.
Touche. The thing is that what is important to us changes over the course of our lives. So when I think about where I was at 23, what was important to me at that time was trying to grow compensation and to climb the ladder and make a little bit more money because I was not making any. And now at 44, what's important to me now is different. And I would have wanted a different kind of relationship with my supervisor and a little bit more autonomy and creativity at work. So the list of conditions is pretty set when you look at all the research around the psychology of motivation. But in and amongst the list of important things, those things differ in importance to different people. And what's important to them will change over the course of their lives. So if anybody ever tells you that leadership is easy or simple, they're lying. It's complex.
Amen.